Hello, or as we say in Australia, g'day mate, how you going? You good, thanks? I'm the Glidus, and for some reason I ranked all of the food descriptions in George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire series a fantasy meal. I mean, books on live streams here on YouTube. It started out as a meme. How did it end up on stream? It was only a meme! It was only a meme! And for even some more of a reason, lots of people watched me doing that. I should say us, the other guy was involved too, but this is a me video, damn it. We talked a lot of nonsense in those streams, but something that kept coming up was the origin of the foods George uses in his books. Western fantasy as a genre tends to base its worlds off of pre-modern Europe. This makes sense. Other genres have similar historical bases in their DNA. There's nothing fishy going on here. But what's interesting to me is when authors choose to diverge from this basis.
Potatoes!
Because while most of the food in Ice and Fire could feasibly have been seen in the real courts of medieval lords, on the streets of European cities, or on the tables of average peasants, some items are, in some sense, not of that world. Now, of course, I'm not pointing fingers. George is welcome to put whatever the hell he wants into his world. Dragons, for instance, are a notable departure from real-world medieval Europe. It just fascinates me, and we're gonna talk about it today. We're gonna start with the obvious one that I kept trying to figure out during the streams. Chapter 1. Corn. Corn! Corn! The correct answer is...
Can you please just make a corn in Westeros video so you can stop telling me this?
Mormont's raven has made this particular crop stick out like a sore ear of corn. By my count, the bird says corn no fewer than 71 times throughout the books, putting it ahead of even lemon in word count. And entire wars have been fought in this community regarding where lemons grow. So what's the deal with corn?
Anything new with corn?
Oh yeah, corn.
Corn is an American plant domesticated by Mesoamericans 9,000 years ago, and therefore completely unknown to Europeans until the Columbian Exchange. However, as you may already be aware, corn isn't just corn. Corn is a village in France, a town in Oklahoma, that weird thing on your foot, a shit 2004 drama thriller about how genetically modified foods are evil? I would rather look at a toilet for 2 hours than to see this movie again. Oh my god. And a type of snow, apparently. Corn, the bird said. Snow. But the word corn in the English language is older than English speakers knowing what corn was. And that's because it sort of just meant grain, which corn is one of, and it still does mean this in much of the world. We still call the dried fruit of the black pepper vine peppercorn. That's not a grain. Why do we call it that? So from now on, I'm gonna call corn by its bougie name, maize, just to keep things clear. The words corn and grain actually share an etymology and a meaning. Stop me if you've heard this one before, but it's just the ancient ancestor word, something like gram, went through Latin and got churned out as granum, but when it went through German, it got churned out as corn. Yada yada yada, Germanic peoples settle England, Normans conquer England, and now we have this bullshit mishmash language with two different sounding words that mean the same thing because they actually are the same word. In England, corn mostly meant wheat, but north of the wall, it more usually meant oats. It's just the common staple grain of the area. Down here, it means barbecue shapes. You bloody beaut. So it's no shock that when English speakers settled North America, they called maize, the common staple grain of the area, corn. Maize, by the way, is the anglicized form of the Spanish maíz, itself borrowed from the Taino word maíz. Okay, so that's the obligatory etymology portion of the video concluded. What was my problem again? Right, so because this more general definition of the word corn exists, I participated in a bit of coping in regards to George's usage of it in the books. Maybe he was using it in the more archaic sense, and Mormont was actually feeding the bird oats. Why, I and presumably others thought, would George step outside his thoughtfully constructed facsimile of a medieval European foodscape? I must emphasize, Westeros is not Europe, and I would never argue that it should be. But you have to notice that he took care to never mention the other foods and drinks that are ubiquitous today, but were unknown to the people of pre-modern Europe, such as potatoes, coffee, Pop-Tarts, tomatoes, vanilla, jaguar, Tim Tams, an entire giant sequoia for lunch, and cardboard. Hell, George even left out bananas, which are an old world world crop that nevertheless had very minimal presence in Europe prior to the 16th century. And while Bravos might be more modelled on Renaissance Europe, Westeros is firmly stuck in the early 2nd millennium, except for the Citadel, sort of. So I went on pretending that George obviously didn't mean corn when he said corn all those times, in spite of the obvious evidence to the contrary. The 3 instances where he literally writes sweet corn. Unlike corn, there's no ambiguity to the term sweet corn. It's always exactly this. I mean this. Simply put, there's no other thing Catelyn could have been served at Bitterbridge. Like, come on, man. Arya and Yoren literally steal ears of sweet corn from a cornfield, which they roast in the husk. They fucking eat it off the cob. Isn't there a Rick and Morty joke about how corn is the only thing that is had on the cob? I wouldn't know. I'm too stupid to understand Rick and Morty. I don't see how they'd be eating wheat off of a male swan, so the only other explanation is that George has meant maize this whole time. So take your mind out of the English or French countryside you had imagined the Riverlands to be. You were wrong. It's Iowa.
This is what a cornfield looks like, honey.
And then there's this interview and Q&A with George from MrCon 2016 where he just flat out says with words out of his mouth that it's maize.
I have corn in my world, and it's actual American corn. It's maize. Does it feel wrong? I don't know. Some readers have complained about it. Oh, you shouldn't have corn because it's medieval. Well, it's not medieval England. It's Westeros.
He's completely right, and even if you don't like it, you can pretend that it got there through trade from somewhere else. Good for you. More importantly, can we put "I have corn in my world" on t-shirts immediately?
I have corn in my world.
Why can't they have corn?
And as another part of this point, George brings up that Tolkien's Shire, a setting otherwise committed to the trappings of the pre-modern English countryside, has potatoes.
Potatoes.
Tolkien, of course, famously had potatoes in the Shire.
Gurm surmises that old Jurt was just a big fan of taters, so he stuck them in. Well, George is a maize fan, so now we have a Westeros where, and this isn't even that much of a stretch, popcorn might exist. I knew there was something I forgot to ask him. Okay, so that's the corn of it all. Now that the seal's been broken and Westeros is clearly not limited to food that was accessible to medieval Europeans, let's see what else George has picked up from around the world. Not to point fingers and say he messed up, just it might be fun. Maybe we'll learn something. Maybe we'll pass the time. Maybe we'll make more than 4 videos this year.
Disturbing thought. No, I don't think it likely.
Chapter 2. Pumpkins and peppers and peanuts, oh my! That's right, George appears to be a big pumpkin fan as well. And who isn't? Orange vegetable supremacy. Although to be pedantic, pumpkin is a fruit. It's also a vegetable, but it is a fruit. More specifically, it's a berry? Whatever it is, it's from Central America, so one would think that the 3 mentions of pumpkin in the books would have saved me all that corn trouble. But think further, 1. In almost the exact same scenario as corn/grain, this word that we now understand to refer specifically to a thing exclusively from the New World was once in fact more general and applicable in the Old World. Pumpkin can and should be traced back to ancient Greek, pepon, which meant and means melon. This is why I was able to cope on this one as well. George didn't mean that kind of pumpkin. He was just saying melon in the archaic way. Well, no, he meant pumpkin. The pumpkin you're thinking of, the one from Thanksgiving and Halloweenmas. Interestingly, each of the times pumpkins are mentioned in Ice and Fire, it's never actually as a foodstuff. It's always comparative or metaphorical. That is to say, a physical pumpkin is never described by any of the points of view, nor is it ever contained in any of the meals. Similarly, and also astoundingly, of the 15 times George writes melon, none of them are as a part of a meal someone eats. Shocking. Missandei serves Daenerys some melon, but she's not hungry. When George writes melon, it's usually as a comical stand-in for someone's head exploding. Squash, on the other hand, is a food for George. 3 times he writes it into his meals, whereas squash as a verb is only ever used once. The word squash, as in the food, not the verb or the wall tennis, entered English via an Algonquian language, so this also should have been enough to convince me George was writing specifically about New World foods. But what's going on with the whole pumpkin melon thing? Well, going off the fourth result Google found when I searched for melon, a melon is a fruit block that grows from a fully grown melon stem, which is in turn grown from melon seeds. I also learned that melons are craftable using 9 melon slices. They can drop a maximum of 9 seeds when broken with the fortune tool, and that melons were first introduced in September of 2011. Elsewhere, I learnt that melon refers to any sweet fruit produced by a plant of the family Cucurbitaceae, and also sometimes human breasts. That family is made up of almost 1,000 species from 100 genera, so bear with me. Walrus with me too, it's been so long since we walrused. The cucurbits, also called gourds or the squash family, include melons, gourds, squashes, anything along those lines. You can probably tell from the name that cucumbers fall into this. They're actually closely related to true melons, and therefore cantaloupe and honeydew.
Go on.
Watermelons are a bit more distant, being in a different genus but the same tribe. Brennan, all in the Old World. Pumpkins and squashes are in the next tribe over. Cucurbitaceae, all in the New World. Now, to pick apart that definition of melon, a sweet fruit produced by a cucurbit, I've never heard anyone call a pumpkin a melon, even though it is a sweet fruit produced by a cucurbit. Maybe the distinction is Old World versus New World. Anyway, did you know that pumpkin and zucchini are the same species? Courgette, you know what I mean. I think I'm done talking about pumpkins now. Oh, and in case you're wondering, the only mention of penguins in the books are on the edition notices. Sticking to our theme, the word pepper means a few things. Pepper, as in black pepper, as in salt and, is quite present in Ice and Fire, but it isn't one of our George is being a bit cheeky plants because in the real world it's native to the southwest coast of India and has famously been part of European cuisines for millennia. While the Roman Empire's control of the Middle East facilitated relatively cheap importing of Indian spices to Europe, eventual Islamic and Venetian control of this trade route was a significant factor in prompting the Iberian expeditions, which facilitated the Columbian exchange that, in a beautiful full circle, led to George R.R. Martin being aware of maize and pumpkins and, less significantly, existing at all. If we're calling Westeros an analogue to medieval Western Europe in particular, then pepper is quite well placed. Pepper was expensive during this time, and George appropriately limits its usage to the courts of lords and kings. In A Dance with Dragons, Godric Burrell indicates that black pepper is an expensive spice imported from Volantis, which seems suitable to me, and the World Book says it comes from the Summer Isles too. The only questionable account of pepper to me is that Bran reckons the Rat Cook's stew contained lots of pepper, and I'm not sure if the Night Fort would have had the funds or means to import that much of an exotic spice just for some fun cannibalism-based vengeance. This is just a minor detail in some rich kid's recollection of an old legend though, so who cares? What's more important is the other peppers. Black pepper is the same plant as white and green pepper, they're just prepared differently, and long pepper is closely related, all in the genus Piper, native to Asia. Most other things you think of as peppers are completely unrelated to these. We'll start with Sichuan pepper because it's also native to Asia, but I'm not sure that these appear at all in Ice and Fire. Sichuan more closely approximates the fiery nature of the other peppers George references, but instances of characters describing and eating entire peppers don't really make sense with Sichuan. George is clearly referencing the fruits of the New World plants in the genus Capsicum of the nightshade family. This includes every chili pepper, jalapenos, habaneros, bird's eye, flea, cayenne, nandos, you name it, and bell peppers, which here in the Antipodes we actually just call capsicum. By the way, flea is the only chili pepper not from the New World. He's from the Melbourne suburbs of Mount Waverley and Burwood. I used to frequent a kebab shop in Burwood. It was awesome. The chemical compound capsaicin, more formally known as 6-en-4-hydroxy-3-methoxyphenyl methyl 8-methyl non-6-enamide, occurs exclusively in the plants of genus Capsicum, and therefore was completely absent from the Old World prior to the 16th century. As irritants that simulate the sensation of tissue burning, capsaicinoids likely developed as a defense mechanism to inhibit the growth of fungi and consumption by mammals. This is evolutionarily advantageous for the plant because mammal teeth crush and destroy capsicum seeds before they can germinate. Birds, on the other hand, who are completely unaffected by capsaicin, pass the seeds through their digestive systems unharmed, allowing the plant to successfully propagate. So why not discourage mammals from eating them by triggering the neural pathway that indicates fire of the mouth? Unfortunately for genus Capsicum, us humans are into freaky shit like that.
My only concern is that it might be a little too mild.
Anyway, that's why spicy shit exists. Pepper and Sichuan don't have capsaicin, they have other things going on that don't trick your brain into thinking that you've shoved your tongue into a volcano. So at this point, there's no debating that George's frequent mentions of fiery peppers is in reference to chili peppers of genus Capsicum, which are New World plants. Interestingly though, he never uses the word chili to refer to these, only pepper. I assume because the word chili is borrowed from the Aztec Nahuatl language. I mean, he uses chili as in cold, but he never uses chili as in hot, or chile as in long.
On a completely unrelated note, could you please pass me the fucking milk?
Tangent time. There's a tarantula, sorry, I'm about to put a big spooky spider on your screen. Look away or skip it a little bit if you don't want that. Whose venom contains a different chemical which triggers the same receptor that simulates burning tissue. This spider is endemic to just the island of Trinidad, and it hunts small mammals among other prey, so this toxin serves a similar purpose to capsaicin. It's anti-mammalian biotechnology that developed separately in New World nightshades and New World arachnids. How cool is that? The toxin in question is called a vanillotoxin, which prompts a double tangent because this reminds me that vanillin, the prominent flavor compound of vanilla, is an agent in the biosynthesis of capsaicin. See this Nile Red video for more information on how to turn plastic gloves and vanilla into hot sauce. Synthetic vanillin is a lot cheaper to produce than the famously stubborn vanilla orchid, and is produced by doing chemistry to lignin, a polymer present in most plants, but industrially relevant in the production of wood pulp. That is to say, synthetic vanilla and, as a result, synthetic capsaicin are an industrial byproduct of paper making. Maybe that's how I'll eat the fucking book. Of course, there's more than just one chemical responsible for the flavor of these foods, which is why the synthetic stuff isn't as complete as the real thing. I'm obsessed with vanilla, if you couldn't tell. What do you think would be Dunk's favorite ice cream flavor?
Chocolate. It's not going to be vanilla. Like, it's not going to be boring, but it's not going to be surprising either.
But it isn't mentioned in Ice and Fire at all, so I had to use chili peppers and spider venom to talk about it instead. Okay, on to peanuts. Peanuts are way less relevant to Ice and Fire than pumpkins and peppers are. I just wanted a third thing so I could do my cute chapter name. But peanuts are mentioned and are a New World plant, so here we go. In Dance, Tyrion gets annoyed by how slowly he's traveling because Illyrio keeps getting out to take a leak, and he thinks to himself, our Lord of Cheese is the size of an elephant, but he has a bladder like a peanut. So like pumpkins and melons, George isn't using the peanut as a foodstuff, but as a point of comparison. That's great, but what gets me is that Tyrion knows what a peanut is and associates them with elephants, as many do in the real world.
Please do not offer my god a peanut.
This is a bit funny because elephants are native to Africa and Asia, and peanuts are a South American plant, so obviously elephants had nothing to do with peanuts until we forced the issue. In fact, the peanut pachyderm paradigm didn't arise until quite recently. In the 19th century, animal-based tourist attractions like zoos and circuses wanted customers to feel engaged with their animals by feeding them. Peanuts had become a relatively cheap snack food, and an extra income stream was found by selling peanuts to attendees to feed the elephants. Elephants, you might have noticed, are fucking enormous. Mastodonic, if you will. And yeah, they'll eat some peanuts. Woefully inefficient as their entire diet, but good for a snack. So this association wasn't natural or anything to do with a predisposition towards legumes that aren't actually nuts. It's just a byproduct of Victorian-era economic realities. Have fun explaining that one in Westerosi terms. Okay, here's the tangent for this one. And not to toot my own trunk, but I think it's the coolest observation I've ever made. George never describes elephant as a food item, thank God.
That's disappointing.
But I don't know if I'll ever have a better opportunity to say this. Across the 5 published books and the currently documented Winds of Winter sample chapters, the words elephant and mammoth have been used the exact same number of times. I don't even know what we're doing here anymore. Pack it up, go home, we're done. It's over. Chapter 3. Other plants. Orange. I'm being a bit cheeky here. Westeros has oranges, but who cares? Because oranges are an old world food originating in this bit. However, their presence in medieval Europe is uncertain, leaning towards unlikely. The first known Western artwork depicting oranges is from 1434, and they really took off starting in the 16th century. But in the medieval era, the sweet orange as we know it probably wasn't accessible to Europeans. The history of citrus cultivars is sorta the most confusing thing ever, with everything being a hybrid of a hybrid and a bastard, and you have to know what a pomelo is, so we're not going to mess around with any of that. What we are going to mess around with is the blood orange, which is a variety of sweet orange, and which is described as a foodstuff in Ice and Fire. They're from Dawn, but they're served in King's Landing, and Peter eats one in the Vale too, for metaphorical reasons. The problem here is that blood oranges did not exist until the 18th century. I reckon George included them because he likes them as a food and as a metaphor, and he thought they'd contribute to the Mediterranean vibe of Sunspear. While we're talking about citrus, we might as well touch on lemons, the fruit of destiny. Lemons were introduced to Europe during the Roman Empire, though they weren't really grown there until the 15th century. They were grown in southern Spain centuries earlier, but while Andalusia is geographically a part of Europe, at that time it wasn't part of Europe culturally or religiously. It wasn't part of Christendom. Lots of people identify Dawn with Spain, and I think this is a large part of why. It's a part of Westeros, but it's obviously distinct from the rest of Westeros. Like Spain, it was part of a different civilizational history to the rest of the continent, so of course, that's where the lemons come from. I'm not sure what makes the co-lemon of the Eyrie has to do with this though. Tea! On the third page of the first Sansa chapter in the first book, Sansa tells Arya that there's going to be lemon cakes and tea. Now, we're here to talk about foodstuffs that would be inaccessible to English people, so you might be wondering what we're doing here. What could be more English than tea? The answer is plundering other parts of the world. While in the modern Anglosphere, there's no closer association between a people and their favourite drink than with the English and their tea, other than perhaps the Kiwis and their L&P, or Adladians and their grey water. It was only in the 17th century that chai hit English lips, and it only really became a ubiquitous beverage in the second half of the 19th. That is to say, no medieval European would know what tea was, let alone be sipping it with lemon cakes. The word tea is, in a sense, the same word as the Hindi word chai, both ultimately deriving from the old Chinese word cha. It refers to the drink, the leaves it's brewed with, and the plant the leaves are from. Camellia sinensis, native to that same bit from earlier. Although the word tea these days can refer to drinks brewed from other plants like mint tea or chamomile tea or ayahuasca, when the word first entered the English language, it specifically referred to tea, and prior to English knowledge of and obsession with tea, those herbal drinks were considered medicines, tinctures, not beverages. By the way, white tea, yellow tea, green tea, oolong tea, and black tea, they're all the same. It's all the same plant, just processed differently. So I'm not really sure what to make of Sansa saying there'll be tea. Every other occurrence of tea in the books makes it clear that we're not talking about Camellia sinensis. There's mint tea and nettle tea and of course tansy tea and moon tea. Not sure how they fit the moon into that little pot, but you know, desperate times. The word tea being used in those cases is sort of like, what the hell else is modern era author George R.R. Martin supposed to call a recreationally enjoyed hot beverage of mint infused in water that readers will be able to understand? There wasn't really a word for that before tea entered the language. Sunflowers. In my head, sunflowers are such an Eastern European icon that I had no idea they're actually a New World plant, native to Western North America. Sunflowers aren't described as a foodstuff in the books, but they do appear as the symbol of House Sky, or possibly Qui of Sunhouse, or possibly Sunflower Hall in the south of the Reach, or possibly... it's just the south of the Reach. That's the end of the story, really, but I might as well talk more words about sunflowers for a bit because they're so cool. You've probably heard that sunflowers follow the sun throughout the day. This is a sneaky half-truth. Young sunflowers do this, and they're so good at it that they'll keep doing it even if the sun is obscured by cloud for a few days, or if you rotate it manually. But mature sunflowers are fixed in place, typically facing eastward. The thinking is that young sunflowers follow the sun to maximize exposure to the delicious sunlight they eat, but once developed, they face eastward to warm up as fast as they can in the morning to maximize visits from pollinators. They speedrun maturation so they can then min-max the animals that facilitate their reproduction. Sunflowers are epic gaming. The flower part of the sunflower isn't actually a flower, it's a shitload of flowers. All those petals around the edge, those are flowers. The little fruits inside the head, those are flowers. The sunflower is sort of a meta flower. As such, sunflowers sunflower seeds are actually the fruit of those flowers. Remove the hull and that's the seed. And of course, the florets of a sunflower head is one of the easiest to observe cases of epic phyllotaxis, displaying Fermat's spiral, Fibonacci numbers, and how they approach the golden ratio. Sugar was prohibitively expensive and completely inaccessible to the vast majority of medieval Europeans, who would mostly sweeten their foods with honey, the sponsor of today's video. Using my code in the description, you can get honey all over your fingers and, for a limited time offer, your toes as well. And yet, Sansa's lemon cakes are frosted in sugar, Tyrion's milk steak at the Purple Wedding is spiced with sugar, and there are no fewer than 3 instances of decorative spun sugar objects which I cannot begin to fathom the cost of. Unlike other exotic plant products, there's no given source for the sugar in this series. Maybe they're growing sugar beet in the gift? Who cares? Well, actually, I care. Sugar! Rum exists, and there's no reason to believe it's made any different to real rum, which is a product of sugar cane. It's also loosely associated with southwest Essos, particularly Lys. The Cinnamon Wind carries rum when Samwell boards it, but it's a merchant vessel that's just been to like every single port on the planet, so all we know is that rum probably isn't made in Westeros. This one isn't a food thing, but I thought I'd bring it up because its origin is still somewhat out of setting. When Sam departs the wall to become a maester, Jon's final words to him are, "Remember to hit the like button." The like button was completely unknown to medieval Europeans, as it was invented in the Bay Area in the 21st century. But similar functions may have been known to them, and again, George is free to build the world he desires. Similarly, as a prerequisite for entering the House of Black and White, Arya has to check below the video to make sure you're subscribed. And of course, in Game of Thrones, Tyrion tells you to ring the bell so you can be notified of new uploads of his Rage Bait podcast.
Why?
Here's just a list now. Yeah, here's the rest of the plants George mentions that exist in Westeros but not in pre-modern Europe. Everything else is either native to Eurasia and could feasibly have been known to medieval Europeans, made up completely by George, or I just don't know what he's talking about because I don't know as many things as he does.
I know S.
Evening Star. Pecans. Pecans! I know this video was supposed to be about food, but we're just talking about every plant here, so fuck it. There are redwoods in Westeros. How did I miss this? The 3rd chapter in the series has Catelyn telling you that Riverrun is amongst the redwoods, and this detail is repeated when the narrative later takes her back to Riverrun. This completely changes how I think of Riverrun now. There is a species of redwood that's native to China, but let's be real here. I think we know that George wasn't envisioning the almost extinct and much shorter Dawn redwood when writing this. He meant the American redwoods. And here I thought Edmure Tully never got to eat a giant sequoia for lunch. Green beans served at the Red Wedding are native to South America. Sour leaf, while not explicitly tobacco, is pretty much tobacco, a New World plant. Chapter 4. Animals. Sometimes people eat animals. We're working on it, but it still happens. In Westeros, sometimes people eat animals that don't exist in our world, because we already ate them all. At the Harvest Feast at Winterfell, Bran describes Aurochs, the now extinct wild bovine ancestor of modern cattle. The last known Aurochs died in 1627, though it's possible they survived for a while longer in certain places. So this is weird. It's a food that was accessible to the lords of medieval Europe, but isn't accessible to us today. So, I mentioned earlier when talking about peanuts that George never describes elephant as a foodstuff.
I wanted those elephants.
Well, when Queen Alysanne visited Castle Black, the Night's Watch feasted her on mammoth meat. Sure, I guess. Mammoths in Westeros are undergoing a local extinction. There used to be lots, but now there's only a few hundred left. In our world, mammoths went extinct around 4,000 years ago, and while humans may not have dealt the last blow, we certainly didn't help keep them alive. And believe it or don't believe it or do something else, mammoth is the only animal served as food in Westeros that would have been inaccessible to medieval Europeans. Just as I did with plants though, I might as well go through all the non-food animals just to be maximally autistic. Now I've never heard tell of this Tylenol fellow before, but he's doing wonders for my research projects based on pointlessly comparing a fantasy setting to historical animal and plant distributions. Okay, so this is obvious obviously dumb, but dire wolves did not exist in medieval Europe. The dire wolf did exist in the Americas until 10,000 years ago, though they seem to have been roughly the same size as the modern grey wolf. Recently, some wackadoodles used the cut and paste tool inside some grey wolf puppies and called them dire wolves, which I'm sure was a great photo shoot for George, but this was nothing, and if anything, it actually harmed conservation efforts. Good job. The red-tailed hawks in Renly's pavilion at Bitterbridge are endemic to North America. The red wolf John Connington's cloak is made from was also American, though he's been living in Essos for decades, so whatever, maybe Essos is America as well as Asia, who knows? Catelyn recognizes the blue jays on Sir Colin of Greenpool's surcoat, and the pie at the Butterwell wedding in the Mystery Night has, among other birds, blue jays, mockingbirds, and a great red parrot, which I have to assume is a scarlet macaw, all of which are endemic to the Americas. And I probably don't have to explain the turkey that Theon sights in the Wolf's Wood. Mockingbirds are an interesting one because they're actually sort of important to the story, right? The sigil of House Swan in the Stormlands features a black swan, and in Clash, Arya sights 3 of them. In the real world, black swans are endemic to Australia. Oh fuck yeah, we made it into the video! There's a mountain clansman tribe in the Vale called the Milk Snakes, and upon reaching Bryndon's cave, Bran briefly considers that they've stumbled into a milk snake nest. Milk snakes are native to the eastern United States, and they're harmless, Bran. Okay, I think it's safe. Let's quickly talk about crabs. Whoop! Crab mentioned! You know what that means! Get out of here. Arya describes a few sorts of crab that have nothing to do with Europe, like the leopard crab, but this is when she's in Braavos, so whatever. The spider crab sigil of House Burrell is somewhat conspicuous. You're probably familiar with the Japanese spider crab, but spider crabs are actually an entire superfamily with many species distributed around the world, including the European spider crab. On the topic of arthropods, crickets are mentioned a few times, usually to evoke the ambient sound they're known for, even though cricket wasn't invented until around the 16th century. Oh, fuck you. Lions are obviously a fixture of the Westerlands, with many houses' sigils featuring the big kitties, most importantly, the Lannisters. Though wild lions in the West are never cited in the story, and Leaf says they've been hunted to extinction, they were apparently roaming wild in the West as recently as Tytos Lannister's tenure as Warden, as Gregor and Sandor Clegane's grandfather earned his knighthood by saving Tytos from a lioness. George has even said that lions used to make their dens inside Casterly Rock, while Panthera leo, the modern lion, seemingly never made its home in Western Europe. Its relative Pantherospilii, the extinct cave lion, ranged as far west as Spain and indeed lived in southern England. I don't know who needs to know this, but it's probably everyone. The Summer Isles are home to old red men, silver pelts, and night stalkers. The first two there are clearly references to the best animal, the orangutan, and a serious honorable mention, the gorilla. Night stalkers are a bit harder to pin down, but they might just be freaky chimpanzees. The island of Leng is apparently home to spotted humpback apes almost as clever as men, and extremely strong and large hooded apes. No clue. Now, did I go to the Melbourne Zoo to film the orangutans there for this single paragraph just so I could write my zoo membership off as a business expense? I'll let you be the judge. Tyrion recalls a sea cow having washed up under Casterly Rock, and Jon reckons that sea cows are close at hand near Hardhome. Gurm is a very learned man, and he's certainly smarter and better informed than I am, but I would encourage him to have another glance at the natural range of sea cows. The term sea cow generally refers to any member of the order Sirenia, which includes manatees, the dugong, and another guy we'll get to later, and they live in these regions. Waters that look like this. Now, when I imagine Hardhome, it looks more like, hey yeah, something like that. In fairness, that other guy we'll get to later is Stella's sea cow, and it lived here, in waters that look more like this. They went extinct in the 18th century because Europeans found out that it was that incredible combo of slow and delicious. So we can justify George putting the otherwise tropical sea cow up in the fucking Arctic. Intermission. Hey guys, just a short break in the video to give you an important message. Actually, it's more of a request. Over the years, I've made a lot of jokes in these videos, but I've noticed that across the tens of thousands of comments on them, you guys have only made 2 or 3 different inside jokes. Don't get me wrong, the Tyrek horse thing gets funnier every time someone says it. I'm just saying it feels like I put more effort into joke diversity than you guys collectively do. So let's get some new inside jokes going. How about Delp? Delp's always funny. Or maybe something from this video, like Arya in a cornfield, or eating an entire giant sequoia for lunch, or the bit about Sansa's fish fingers you haven't gotten to yet. Doesn't really matter what the new joke is, just make sure that you obnoxiously post it everywhere you can, especially in other YouTubers' comment sections. Okay, back to my book report. Elk. Now, I've made the mistake of discussing the word elk before, but I guess we have to do it again. Though George uses elk way more, he also uses moose, both in Westeros. The confusion here comes from another corn, grain, pumpkin, melon sort of situation. Elk is an old word in English, and it originally referred to the world's largest extant deer, alces, which lived and lives in both Eurasia and North America. But in America, this thing is called a moose. The word moose is borrowed from Algonquian languages, thus is inextricably New World. Then there's this thing, Cervus canadensis, the second largest extant deer, which was previously unknown to Europeans upon encountering it in the New World, although it is actually native to Eurasia as well. By this time, the word elk had generalized in meaning to refer to any large deer. So in America, this animal is called an elk, and since this time, in British English, the word elk has re-specified to refer to just the original elk, the moose. Are you confused yet? Cervus canadensis is also called the wapiti, another native term. So, when George Martin, an American writer whose story is set in a loose analogue of medieval England, writes the words moose and elk, what is he referring to? Moose is pretty clear, it only ever refers to alces, and if he's using both words, that's probably because he's referring to both animals separately. So in Ice and Fire, elk probably means wapiti. But then there's another thing, the great elk, the motherfucker Cold Hands rides in on. Sam describes it as 10 feet tall at the shoulder and its antlers as almost 10 feet wide. This is likely based on the extinct giant deer, also called the Irish elk, Megaloceros giganteus, which lived only in Eurasia and superficially more closely resembles the moose than the wapiti, while being closely related to neither of them. I was lucky enough to see one in Bristol last year. Not like it was a skeleton. They were shorter than Cold Hands mount, but the antlers were actually wider. So if George uses the word elk to refer to this dashing moose-looking rack of bones, then is the word elk always in reference to moose and meese? I genuinely can't make any call. The fact that he uses the word moose as well just really confuses the matter. Are they different? Are they the same? Who cares? And then there's Missandei's brother, Moosador, and we're just not getting into that. Unlikely animals. Not Westeros this time, but Syrio Forel tells Arya that dinosaurs exist. Terrible walking lizards with scythes for claws. And of course, dinosaur literally means terrible lizard in Greek. Everyone knows that one, but what's less discussed is in that same sentence he drops zebras, giraffes, giant tapirs, manticores, and most importantly, tigers that carry their cubs in a pouch. This tragically indicates the existence of Tasmania in George's world, as here Syrio is referring to the thylacine, the Tasmanian tiger, the largest carnivorous marsupial, which we drove to extinction in the 1930s. On the topic of dinosaurs, what the hell are lizard lions? They float half submerged in water like logs, and that sounds pretty crocodilian, but they're not crocodiles, as those also exist in the Summer Isles and Sothoios, so they're probably alligators. Sorry, Gharials. I remember you, Gharials. In one of George's much older series, which you should read, Tough Voyaging, lizard lions exist and are specifically alligator-like. They might not be the same guys as in Ice and Fire, but I don't know, man, they're probably similar. Shadow cats are probably just like mountain lions with black fur, right? Maybe they're a completely melanistic population of a panthera species like black leopards are, but leopards exist in Essos, and so do panthers in the Summer Isles, and shadow cats definitely give me mountain lion vibes. They're spoken of as quite dangerous and formidable, so it's unlikely that it's just a smaller wild cat. Unicorns exist, even though in the real world they all went extinct after the incident. Leaf tells Bran that unicorns are all but gone, and common belief has them living only on the untamed island of Skagos and one of George's many distant Lovecraft references, Ib. John's wolf dream shows us that Rickon's direwolf Shaggy Dog killed an enormous goat with a long horn. That might sound a little strange to our modern ears, but in medieval Europe, the unicorn was conceived of as a goat-like animal. And we later find out that Rickon is on Skagos, so yeah, Shaggy Dog killed a period-accurate unicorn. Cool. I talked about this in the horse stream that we did earlier this year, but the Zorse of Ice and Fire is not a stand-in for the zebra. Zebras exist, and Zorses also exist. The Zorse is a real-world zebroid. Specifically, it's the hybrid offspring of a zebra stallion and a horse mare. This appears to be how the Jogos Nye created the Zorse too in George's world. Real-world Zorses are sterile, but Ice and Fire's Zorses are a stable breeding population. They breed in stables. It's just a little horse joke for you.
Hey.
Where? I love hay!
This is just one of many cases of humans in Ice and Fire deliberately creating animal hybrids to serve their own purposes. In my eyes, supporting the hypothesis that dragons were created in a similar process, but we're not getting into it. On a similar note, while both humans and horses did exist in medieval Europe, there's no documented cases of humans who can transform into horses. I think that's a Westeros special. White ravens in the real world are extremely rare, singular specimens of otherwise normal raven populations, and their coloration is caused by leucism. Leucism is a catch-all term for conditions that cause the reduction of pigmentation generally, not to be confused with albinism, which is specifically the complete absence of melanin production. To demonstrate the difference between leucism and albinism in the same sort of animal, let's take the wallaby. So that's a normal wallaby, and this is a leucistic wallaby that I recently met. Its name is Kimber, and this is an albino wallaby. So yeah, that's cool. In contrast, the white ravens of Westeros appear to be either a specific population or even a distinct species. They're bigger and smarter than normal ravens, and apparently there's a lot of beef between the two sorts. They are specifically said to not be albinos, meaning the only albino raven in the series is the guy stuck in the tree. On the topic of coloration, Bran spots a black squirrel in the wolf's wood. I didn't know that these existed, and that's the cutest fucking thing, oh my god. They are melanistic squirrels, so it works the same way as black leopards and jaguars. It's sort of the opposite of albinism. It's an atypically large amount of melanin production on an individual basis. I'm not just bringing them up because I love them, it's because while this can occur in just about any squirrel species, it's far more common in the eastern grey and the fox squirrel, which are both exclusively American squirrels. This one isn't in Westeros, and it's only mentioned a single time, but it's way too fun to not mention. Zarozoan Daxos tells Daenerys that phantom tortoises have been seen carrying messages between the windowless houses on Warlock's Way. Phantom tortoises? Sign me up? What the hell does that even mean? Gurm's infatuation with turtles, which tortoises are, is long, well documented, and a bit cute.
Turtles have always been my sigil.
I like turtles.
It's really funny to me that the only time the word tortoise is used in this almost 2 million word series is to describe what I can only imagine are translucent ghost reptiles phasing through walls and very slowly floating through the airspace. God, I love these books. Traveling down the Rhoyne, Tyrion, George's favorite character, looks at a lot of turtles, George's sigil, and it sort of reads like George just telling you about some of his favorite turtles. Some of these were not present in medieval Europe, but this chapter isn't set in the obvious medieval Europe analogue that also happens to have corn and squash and turkeys and black swans. Back to the weird shit. Tyrion spots an enormous turtle in the river, bigger than the Shy Maid. Yandri says it's the Old Man of the River, a lesser god of the Rhoynar. It sounds like this is a singular specimen, but the World Book indicates that there's an entire population of these guys. The largest extant turtle in the world is the leatherback, and don't get me wrong, they're fucking huge, but not bigger than a pole boat. Anything but metric. The fossil record holds a larger turtle though, Archelon from the late Cretaceous, growing up to 4.6 meters long and weighing like 3 tons. That's gigantic, but the Shy Maid has 4 cabins, so even that is too small to represent this turtle god. Krakens and leviathans exist in Westeros, being gargantuan squids and whales, respectively. Leviathans specifically are said to be the largest creatures on the planet, and this obviously brings to mind baleen whales. As I said in my video about dragon legs, krakens kinda just straight up actually exist, or at least you can understand why sailors across history would interpret giant and colossal squids as monstrous sea demons. And of course, George features even more magical creatures in his world. Dragons, giant ice spiders, centaurs, basilisks. Obviously, these legendarily dangerous creatures didn't exist in pre-modern Europe. Just Australia. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, Sansa is served fingerfish crisped in breadcrumbs. Fingerfish in the real world are tropical fishies, native mostly to the Indian and Western Pacific Oceans, although one species lives along the eastern coast of Africa. I'm not sure exactly where that would translate to relative to King's Landing, but I'll just let Sansa have her fish fingers. Bye-bye. Thanks for watching. There's probably more I could have talked about, but I'm honestly already quite scared of how long this video is. Press the like button if you're into that sort of thing. Press the subscribe button if you want to live. If you would like to leave a comment, I'm sorry, there's just no way for you to do that. To hear the options again, press 1. Don't actually do that, it'll take you back to the start of the video. Patrons, without whom this could not be done, receive videos early, along with updates, exclusive Discord rights, and a new thing I'm about to tell you about. I've decided to do semi-regular Q&A videos on the second channel, not as structured or edited as last year's Quander, so I can maintain a more transparent dialogue with you, my audience. The first one is already up on the second channel, but if you want to submit a question, you can use the Google form in the description. Patrons have their own super special extra awesome form that takes priority. That's the new thing. That's the new thing. The lowest patron tier is only $3 a month, so you know, it's only $3 a month. Also, if you care, I've uploaded the video of my first Silksong playthrough to my second channel, Glimbus, and the whole thing is up on my VODs channel if you've got a spare 50 hours to kill. Yeah, I have a VODs channel. You don't know me. If you're interested in watching more Asswife food content, I seem to have accidentally produced a shitload of it. There's the food description streams and my cooking video. Fuck. You could also watch my dragon legs video if you're into examining a franchise through an extremely specific lens. Cheers. How about Delp? Delp's always funny.
Potatoes!